Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, when you read familiar passages, it's easy to just skim, right? Looking for the main story beats. Today, we're trying something, well, a bit ambitious maybe. We're taking one single verse, Matthew 17, verse 1, and we're going to show how pretty much every word, every little grammatical choice signals this huge shift in understanding.
That's exactly right. The sources our listeners shared, they really push us way beyond just a surface reading. We're not looking for a travel diary or trying to pinpoint a spot on a map.
No.
The goal here is to really unpack the linguistic clues, the spatial clues that are kind of hidden in the original Greek. And these clues, they suggest this verse isn't just about a hike up some hill. It's describing something profound, what we're calling a domain transfer, or maybe a heavenly ascent.
Yeah, and we've got some great material to work with, deep dives into root concepts, lexicons, grammar, alongside, solid theological interpretation. The aim is that you leave this knowing exactly how this sentence is built and why that structure changes everything.
Absolutely. And the grammar itself, right from the start, it sets up this expectation, an expectation of revelation. If you look at the very beginning, the opening phrase, we hit our first clue about how significant this is going to be, the time marker.
Okay, let's zoom in there. The verse kicks off with menuras is, which translates to after 6 days. Now, if Matthew just meant a little while later, he could have been vague, couldn't he?
Oh, definitely. Much vaguer.
So why this specific number, 6 days? What's the significance?
Well, it's fascinating because the precision itself is doing some serious theological work. First off, the 6 days mark a clear, measurable interval from what just happened, Jesus' discourse in chapter 16 about his suffering and resurrection. So it anchors the event in time.
Right, it connects it. But the sources suggest it's doing more than just marking time on a calendar.
Much more. More importantly, this specific time frame, 6 days, it immediately makes you think of those classic Sinai patterns, from the Old Testament, especially Exodus 24.
Ah, okay. Remind us of that sequence.
Sure. Moses goes up Mount Sinai, right? And the text specifically says the cloud covered the mountain for 6 days. And then on the seventh day, God calls to Moses from the cloud.
Okay, so the number 6 itself becomes a kind of signal. It primes the reader, or the listener back then, for a major divine event, an unveiling.
Precisely. 6 days often marks the completion of the ordinary work week, the cycle of human labor. So it builds anticipation for that seventh-day moment, the moment of rest, of divine presence, of revelation. By having Jesus wait 6 days, Matthew isn't just saying they took a break. He's setting this up as a threshold to glory. He's preparing the stage for a theophany, a manifestation of God.
That makes the timestamp really critical then. It's a narrative device-building expectation. Now, what about the comparison with Luke? Because Luke's account says about 8 days. Does Matthew's specificity clash with that? Is it a contradiction?
That's a great question, and it highlights something important about how time was counted back then.
Yeah.
And no, it's not really a contradiction. The sources actually clarify this nicely. Matthew seems to be using what we'd call an exclusive count. He's counting the 6 full days between the discourse and the ascent.
Okay.
Luke, on the other hand, is likely using an inclusive count. So he's counting the day of the discourse itself, the 6 days in between, and the day of the transfiguration event. Add those up, you get 8. So it's really just a difference in counting style, a common convention back then, not an error about when it happened.
Got it. Different ways of counting the same period. That makes sense. Okay, so the timing is clear, the stage is set, 6 days have passed, revelation is expected, we know when they left. Now let's look at who starts this journey and how the group is chosen.
Right. The agent is stated very clearly. Also, it's Jesus. He's the initiator of the whole ascent. His agency here is, well, it's central to everything we're talking about.
And the sources flag a really powerful word choice straight away, describing what Jesus does. What's the verb Matthew uses for Jesus selecting these disciples?
The first key verb of motion Matthew uses is paralepen. It means something like he takes along, or he takes with him.
And here's where, we need to pause on the grammar because the tense of this verb is apparently doing a lot of work.
It really is. Paralambani is in the historical present tense. Now, for anyone who hasn't, looked at Greek grammar in a while, think of it like this. It's when a storyteller shifts from past tense, Jesus took, to present tense, Jesus takes, right in the middle of the story.
To make it more vivid, more immediate.
Exactly. It jolts you into the present moment. It heightens the immediacy of Jesus' action. It feels like it's happening right now. This isn't a casual, hey, you want to come along kind of thing. Jesus is actively, deliberately selecting these companions, bringing them into closer proximity. And in this context, that closeness usually signals special instruction or, like here, participation in a revelation. Proximity is granted by Jesus.
And the ones he takes, it's that inner circle, Peter, James, and John. Why specifically them?
Well, throughout the Gospels, these three are consistently shown as privileged witnesses. They're there for moments that really define who Jesus is. Tataranoboin. They see the raising of Jairus' daughter.
Right.
And crucially, they're the ones closest to him later in Gethsemane. So their role seems to be witnessing these moments of extreme divine power and also moments of profound human vulnerability.
And I noticed the text adds a little clarifying detail about James and John Tonums, his brother, just specifying John is James's brother.
Yeah, it seems like a small detail, but it subtly underlines their connection, their shared calling, their witnesses brothers as a unit almost. But look even closer at how Matthew lists the names. He uses Kai, and Anne.
You mentioned the term for that earlier, polysyndeton. Can you unpack that a bit? What is it and why use it here?
Sure. Polysyndeton is just a fancy term for using conjunctions like and more often than you strictly need to. Normally, you might use commas. If Matthew wanted speed, he'd write Peter, James, John.
Okay.
But instead, he writes Peter and James and John. That repetition of and actually slows the reader down. It forces you to pause on each name, giving each one deliberate weight.
So it emphasizes the selection process itself.
Exactly. It highlights the careful, measured nature of Jesus' choice. It wasn't a random group grab. Each individual's inclusion matters. It's purposeful.
Okay, that's really clear. So Jesus takes them along, paralambani, establishing proximity and his authority. Now he has to move them upwards. So let's focus on that second key action. Where are they going and how does Jesus get them there?
The second verb of motion is aiphri. This means he brings up or he leads up. And just like paralambani, it's also in the historical present tense. So that immediate, that active tension, it's maintained. Jesus isn't just passively guiding. He leads them up right now in the narrative moment.
Now, does anaphore just mean, walking uphill? Or is there maybe a deeper layer to that word based on how it's used elsewhere?
Well, it certainly means spatial movement upwards. But the sources point out a really interesting range of meaning, especially if you look at how this word, anaphero, is used in the Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint, or LXX.
And what does that comparison show?
In the LXX, anaphero is frequently used in context of worship and sacrifice. It can mean to offer up, like offering a sacrifice.
Okay, so that adds another layer entirely.
It really does. It enriches the scene profoundly. Jesus isn't just leading them to a location. He is, in a sense, leading up, or maybe even offering up, these chosen witnesses who are about to behold divine glory. It subtly anticipates themes of offering, exaltation, even sacrifice, which are, woven throughout Matthew's gospel. They're moving towards the sacred, and Jesus is acting as both guide and, in a way, priest.
Wow, okay. So the movement itself is almost liturgical. And the destination. Es osusini into a high mountain. The sources were very emphatic that the specific mountain doesn't matter.
That's the crucial point. It's indefinite a high mountain, not Mount Tabor, not Mount Hermon. By leaving it unnamed, Matthew keeps the focus entirely on its function, not its geographical coordinates. The high mountain works purely as a symbolic stage for divine encounter, deliberately echoing places like Sinai or Horeb. These are the traditional spots where God's identity is revealed, where covenants are made.
And this setting, the high mountain, combined with that verb of motion, anaphori, this is where that core idea comes in, the domain transfer.
Exactly. And the grammar here is absolutely key. Notice the preposition, the case, plus the accusative case, eusdus. In Greek grammar, that construction specifically marks motion into a place or towards a goal. It implies crossing a boundary.
So it's not just walking on the mountain, but into a mountain realm.
Precisely. It signals a critical domain transfer. They're literally crossing a boundary. A physical one, yes, but more importantly, a spiritual one, established and led by Jesus.
So moving not just from low to high, but from one kind of reality into another. Which brings us to that last critical phrase in the verse. Why do they go up by themselves? Privately. What's the significance of that privacy in this context of domain transfer?
That little adverbial phrase, katz idion, it signals separation. Separation from the crowds, from the everyday, for an exclusive revelation. The privacy highlights a fundamental principle you often see in discipleship narratives. Revelation often comes first in private, before any public witness. Intimacy initiates discipleship.
And if we connect that to the bigger picture, the domain transfer idea, this separation isn't just about getting away from noise, is it? What are they actually being separated from?
They're crossing a threshold, moving away from what our sources term the counterfeit kingdom.
Okay, what does that mean, the counterfeit kingdom?
It essentially refers to the world's ordinary way of operating human systems, human power structures, reality defined by limited, often flawed, human understanding. By being taken up and away, privately, they are stepping into the heavenly realm, you could say. A space where Jesus' true identity, his kingship, his divine authority defines what's real.
So the mountain becomes a kind of temporary zone, a sanctuary almost, where the normal rules of the world are suspended so they can grasp this new reality about Jesus?
That's a good way to put it.
Huh.
The revelation that's about to happen will fundamentally redefine who Jesus is. The privacy shields them during that crucial moment of transition. It allows them to absorb the reality of Christ's glory without the noise, without the competing claims of the world they just left behind down below.
And just to wrap up the sentence structure, that final pronoun, autos them, it gathers Peter, James, and John back together as a single unit, the collective recipients of this incredible revelation.
Yes, and it's so important to see how the syntax, the way the sentence is built, ensures Jesus remains the sole active agent driving the whole thing. He takes them, Parallon Bunny, and he leads them up on a foray. Everything hinges on his deliberate initiative.
This has been, wow, a really deep dive into just one sentence. So to summarize the sequence we've traced, the number 6 set the theological stage, that liminal moment. The 2 verbs of motion, both in that vivid historical present, showed deliberate departure and a sacred arrival. The unnamed mountain functioned as the gateway for this domain transfer. And the privacy, the Katzidian, underlined that this was an initiation into a new reality.
Right. And the actionable takeaway for you, the listener, is this. This deep dive shows that discipleship, as Matthew presents it right here in 17.1, is fundamentally spatial and transformative. It involves a conscious leaving of one domain, the world's assumptions, its claims on you, and actively entering another, the king's sphere of authority, the realm of his glory. And crucially, it happens under Jesus' active leadership. This isn't just ancient history. It's a model for spiritual transition. A transition defined by intentional separation and ascent initiated by him.
It really reframes how you think about being a follower, doesn't it? It's not passive. You see how much active work Jesus is doing in every part of that sentence.
The grammar just doesn't allow for passivity. Not on his part, and really not on theirs either. They are being actively taken, actively led.
So here's a final thought maybe for you to chew on, building on this idea of domain transfer and Jesus's active role. If Jesus so actively initiates proximity and ascent, he takes along and he leads up. How often do we perhaps think of spiritual closeness or growth as something passively received, when the original language here suggests it's more like an active, deliberate relocation, physically and spiritually out of the ordinary?
That's the question, isn't it? Recognizing that intentional movement initiated by him is what marks the crossing of that threshold.
Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive into Matthew 17.1. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.